My wife spent our savings on a stranger's vacation, so I took back every asset and walked away, leaving her facing all the consequences. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and for years, I thought my wife, Hannah, and I were building a secure, happy life together. Every Sunday, we'd sit at the kitchen table with our laptops and calculators, plotting out bills, savings, and long-term goals. We had spreadsheets for everything: emergency funds, retirement contributions, vacations we dreamed about taking one day. Hannah always praised my work ethic, calling me the rock of this marriage, and she promised she'd handle the household finances responsibly. I believed her, trusting her every word, and it felt like we were partners in the truest sense. Our conversations were filled with excitement about the future. Imagine us in a little cabin by the lake, she'd say, eyes sparkling, or traveling through Europe, just the two of us. I'd smile and nod, already picturing the life we were meticulously planning. We both worked hard, her job in marketing, mine in tech, but we agreed the sacrifices were worth it for the life we wanted. Yet, even then, tiny things started to niggle at the back of my mind. I'd notice odd online purchases, small amounts here and there, usually under vague descriptions. She'd get mysterious late-night calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. Each time I questioned it, she laughed it off. "You worry too much," she'd say, running a hand through her hair, "it's just nothing." I wanted to believe her, I really did. Even our home reflected our careful planning. The scent of fresh coffee in the morning, sunlight bouncing off our modest but cozy living room, and the hum of our budget-friendly appliances, it all felt like a testament to our teamwork. I felt a quiet pride in what we were building. I was blind to the cracks beneath the surface, blind to the fact that our foundation, so carefully crafted on spreadsheets and promises, wasn't as solid as I thought. And yet, I had no reason to doubt, until one evening when everything would start to unravel. It started subtly. I noticed small withdrawals from our joint account, amounts too minor to trigger an alarm but strange enough to make me pause. One night, I glanced at our online statement while Hannah was in the shower, and a charge caught my eye: an unfamiliar travel website, several $100s gone in a blink. I tried to shrug it off at first, thinking maybe she'd booked something for a friend or a work event. "Hey, did you book anything online today?" I asked casually later that evening, leaning against the doorway of the kitchen. Hannah's eyes darted briefly to the side, a small hesitation I barely registered at the time. "No, why?" she said, voice light but defensive, as if questioning my curiosity. Her hand fidgeted with a mug handle, tapping it nervously. I felt a flicker of doubt, but I rationalized it: everyone forgets online charges sometimes. Maybe she was just stressed, or maybe I was overthinking. Still, my gut didn't let it go. Over the next few days, I noticed more strange behavior: her phone buzzing when I walked by, conversations ending abruptly. I'd catch her scrolling through apps with a quick swipe when she thought I wasn't looking. The red flags, small at first, began to form a pattern I couldn't ignore. I tried to confront her again, softer this time. "You've been making a lot of online purchases lately," I said gently, trying not to sound accusatory. She smiled, but there was a tension beneath it, the kind of forced reassurance that doesn't quite reach the eyes. "I told you, it's nothing, really," she said, placing the phone down a little too quickly. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the heater filling the apartment. My mind ran through every late-night text, every vague excuse, and every little inconsistency I had brushed aside before. For the first time, I realized maybe this wasn't harmless indulgence. Maybe something bigger was happening, and I wasn't prepared for what I was about to uncover. It hit me like a punch in the gut the evening I checked our accounts after work. A charge for a luxury resort, booked under a name I didn't recognize. My heart sank as I stared at the screen, the numbers mocking me: several $1,000s gone, gone for a vacation that wasn't for us, that wasn't even for someone I knew. I felt my chest tighten, my hands trembling as I scrolled through more transactions. There it was: flights, excursions, spa packages, all meticulously booked and all traced to a stranger. When I confronted Hannah that night, the tension in the apartment was palpable. "Hannah, who is this for?" I asked, my voice low but firm. She froze, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. It's for a friend." "I wanted to surprise them," she said, her words faltering. I could see it in her eyes, the hesitation, the flicker of panic she was trying to mask with a weak smile. I stepped closer, trying to keep my voice calm despite the anger swelling inside me. "A surprise? This is our savings, Hannah. How is this a surprise for a stranger?" I said, the disbelief heavy in every word. She avoided my gaze, fiddling with her wedding ring, murmuring something about wanting to do something nice. But it didn't make sense. Months of careful saving evaporated for someone I didn't even know. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the lights too bright, the hum of the refrigerator too loud. I could feel my stomach knotting, anxiety creeping in, a mix of betrayal and disbelief that made my throat tighten. Everything we had worked for, every plan we'd made together, felt like it had been hijacked. And in that moment, the first real crack appeared in the life I thought we had built. I realized this wasn't just a careless mistake, it was intentional. But I had no idea just how deep the deception went, or how badly my trust had been exploited. I thought the confrontation would be enough to make her see reason. I was wrong. Hannah's face shifted from nervous to defensive in an instant, her brows knitting together as she crossed her arms. "You're overreacting," she snapped, her voice sharper than I expected. "It's just a few things, it's not like I emptied the bank account." She looked genuinely annoyed, and the casual dismissal hit me harder than the initial discovery. I felt my stomach churn as I tried to process her words. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal, the audacity, the way she could act so calm after everything. "Hannah, it's our money. Our plans. How can you say it's nothing?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly despite my effort to stay composed. She shrugged and muttered something about me worrying too much, about being controlling. That moment made my blood run cold. I realized she wasn't just hiding things, she was gaslighting me, trying to make me doubt myself. Over the next few days, I started noticing even more, random charges disguised under vague merchant names, emails about bookings I hadn't authorized, and texts she quickly deleted when I entered the room. Each time I pressed her for clarity, she either deflected with sarcasm or made me feel guilty for questioning her. I began documenting everything secretly, taking screenshots, saving emails, jotting down every odd transaction in a notebook hidden in my desk. The apartment, once a place of comfort, now felt like a trap. I could feel the walls closing in with tension every time she walked past, her smile not reaching her eyes. Even the familiar hum of the refrigerator sounded accusatory. I knew one thing for certain, the situation was escalating far beyond what I had imagined, and the moment to take action was approaching fast. I leaned back on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. If this was how far she'd go with just a few purchases, what else had she done behind my back? I didn't know yet, but I had a sinking feeling that the truth was worse than I could possibly imagine. I thought I had an idea of what I was dealing with, but nothing could have prepared me for the full scope. One evening, after Hannah went out for girls' night, I sat at the kitchen table and started combing through our accounts more thoroughly. That's when I saw it, months of transfers to a single account, carefully disguised under vague payment descriptions and small amounts that never set off alerts. My hands shook as I traced the pattern: flights, resorts, dining experiences, even luxury gifts, all for someone I didn't know. It wasn't a one-off mistake or a harmless indulgence. This was deliberate, calculated, and ongoing. When she returned, I confronted her with the evidence in hand, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Hannah, what is all this?" I demanded, sliding the screenshots across the table. She froze, eyes widening for the briefest moment before she tried to recover. I wanted to do something nice, it wasn't meant to hurt you," she stammered, but the words rang hollow. I could see the cracks in her calm demeanor, the flicker of panic, but there was no genuine explanation. I felt the betrayal wash over me like a cold wave, my chest tightening with every heartbeat. The reality was undeniable. She had been siphoning our hard-earned savings for months, building some secret life I wasn't part of. Every late-night excuse, every evasive answer, every small lie now made sense. And just like that, the life I thought we had built together shattered, leaving me standing in the ruins. I spent that night pacing the apartment, the hum of the heater and the faint city noise outside amplifying my racing thoughts. How could someone I loved, someone I trusted completely, manipulate our entire life for her own selfish whims? I realized this wasn't just a financial betrayal, it was emotional, a violation of every boundary I thought existed in our marriage. And in that moment, I knew I had a choice: stay and watch it destroy me, or fight back. But I wasn't ready yet, not fully. I still had to gather the pieces before I could act. The next morning, I woke with a hollow weight pressing on my chest. I stared at the ceiling, sunlight creeping through the blinds, and felt the crushing reality of what had happened. Months of careful saving, plans for a house, our dream vacation, everything, it was gone, or at least redirected into someone else's hands. I tried to breathe, but it felt like the walls of the apartment were closing in. Even the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, which used to feel comforting, now made me nauseous. I confronted Hannah again, this time expecting tears, remorse, or some sign that she understood the gravity of her actions. Instead, she leaned back on the couch, arms crossed, and muttered, "I didn't think it was a big deal. You worry too much." That simple dismissal, the complete lack of accountability, hit me harder than the initial discovery. "Not a big deal," I whispered, my voice barely steady. This was our life, our future. I felt utterly powerless, trapped in the fallout of someone else's selfishness. The rage simmered alongside despair, and I couldn't imagine a way to recover what was lost. Friends offered sympathetic words over the phone, but nothing helped. I realized the betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal, emotional, the kind that eats away at trust until it disappears entirely. I spent the day wandering the apartment, each room filled with reminders of what we had planned together, the corner where we envisioned our travel maps pinned, the stack of books we'd promised to read together, the tiny jar labeled House Fund. Every detail mocked me now, a cruel reminder of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. By evening, exhaustion took over, and I slumped onto the couch, staring at the city skyline through the window. The hum of traffic below seemed distant, almost indifferent to my pain. I had reached my lowest point. I didn't know how to fight back yet, or even if I could. But deep down, a part of me knew I had to. Because if I didn't act, everything we had built would be gone forever. After that night, something shifted inside me. I realized I couldn't sit and stew in anger or despair forever. I needed a plan, a way to reclaim control over the life Hannah had been siphoning from me. I started by quietly documenting everything, every bank statement, every transaction, every suspicious email or text. I even set up spreadsheets of my own, marking dates, amounts, and any inconsistencies. Each detail felt like a small weapon I could use to level the playing field. I reached out to a lawyer discreetly, explaining the situation without giving away the full story to anyone in our circle. Legal advice became my anchor, giving me the first glimmer of hope that I could take back what was mine. I also changed passwords, locked down accounts, and made sure she had no further access to the funds. It felt good to regain even a tiny measure of control, to stop feeling like a victim. During this time, I started observing Hannah more closely. Every phone call she tried to hide, every evasive glance, every awkward laugh now felt like a piece of a puzzle I was slowly assembling. I could feel the tension building, not hers, but mine, the mix of anticipation, dread, and grim determination. I imagined confronting her with everything laid bare, watching the illusion she had built crumble. The apartment, which had felt suffocating before, now became my command center. The familiar hum of the refrigerator, the sunlight across the countertops, even the scent of coffee brewing, all these sensory details grounded me as I strategized my next moves. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity instead of chaos. But even as I organized, I knew the next step would be risky. Hannah's reaction could be unpredictable, and I had to prepare for every possibility. The stakes were higher than ever, and the tension in the apartment was almost tangible as I waited for the moment to strike. The day I finally acted, my nerves were a mix of steel and fire. I froze our joint accounts, changed passwords, and transferred control of major assets to my name. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that had been stolen. Hannah arrived home that evening, humming, completely unaware of the web of legal and financial barricades I had quietly set in place. The moment she stepped through the door, I saw the subtle shift in her expression, the flicker of confusion, the faint panic she tried to mask. I didn't yell or storm around the apartment, I stayed calm, methodical. "Hannah, we need to talk," I said, voice measured. She stopped mid-step, frowning. "What's going on?" she asked, a tremor in her tone she tried to hide. I laid out the facts, every transaction, every misleading excuse, every attempt to siphon our savings. I watched her face tighten as realization dawned. She stammered, tried to explain, tried to twist the story, but I had documented every detail. "I know what you did, and I've secured everything," I said. There was a brief, heavy silence. The air felt thick, charged with tension. I could feel her desperation radiating, but I didn't flinch. I let her panic quietly, knowing the consequences were already closing in. The apartment felt different that night, charged and tense. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards as she paced, all of it underscored the shift in power. For once, I wasn't powerless. I had moved from victim to strategist, and every piece of evidence I'd gathered was a weapon. But the real test was just beginning. Hannah's next moves would be unpredictable, and I had to stay one step ahead. The storm wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I was no longer standing in the eye of it helplessly. Over the next few days, I watched Hannah unravel in ways that felt both surreal and vindicating. She tried to salvage appearances, sending frantic messages to friends, hinting at misunderstandings, and attempting to rewrite the narrative in her favor. But the evidence was undeniable, and anyone she confided in could see the cracks. I stayed quiet, letting the truth speak for itself while she stumbled through desperate explanations. Every text she sent, every attempt to spin the story, only made the betrayal more obvious. I could feel the power shifting completely. Friends who had been mildly suspicious began to step back, and even colleagues started exchanging subtle glances when she recounted her version of events. She was used to charm and manipulation working like a charm, but this time, the web had been cut. I watched her panic silently from my corner of the apartment, a strange mixture of pity and satisfaction stirring in me. Even in public spaces, her composure began to falter. The coffee shop where we often met felt heavier now, the clatter of cups and low hum of conversation echoing like a spotlight on her unraveling. I stayed calm, smiling politely when our paths crossed, every gesture a quiet assertion of regained control. It was intoxicating to see her scramble, realizing for the first time that the life she tried to manipulate wasn't hers to touch. I felt no need for confrontation, silence was far more powerful than any argument. And yet, a small part of me braced for what she might attempt next, the unpredictable turns that had made the past months so exhausting. By the end of the week, the tension in the apartment was electric. Hannah's desperation was palpable, her charm and excuses failing at every turn. And I knew that the next conversation we had would be the one where the real power dynamics were cemented. The day of the confrontation, the apartment felt impossibly tense, like the air itself was holding its breath. Hannah arrived home, her usual confident stride replaced by cautious steps, eyes flicking around the room like she was expecting a trap. I stayed seated at the kitchen table, calm, composed, letting the weight of my presence fill the space. "Hannah, we need to finalize everything," I said, sliding a folder across the table. Her eyes widened as she glanced down, scanning the neatly organized documents detailing every transaction, every hidden purchase, every attempt to siphon our savings. She opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand gently. "I've documented everything, Hannah. Every flight, every resort booking, every gift to that stranger. The money has been secured, and the accounts are frozen. There's nowhere for further manipulation to hide. Her face paled, and I could see the fight draining out of her, replaced with stunned panic. She tried to cry, to beg, to gaslight me one last time, but the calm certainty in my voice rendered her excuses useless. "This isn't about revenge," I said softly, watching her shift uncomfortably. "It's about accountability. You chose to betray our life, and now you have to face the consequences." The apartment seemed impossibly still except for her uneven breaths. The power dynamic had shifted completely. She had spent months trying to manipulate and control, and now every tool she had used against me was turned inward on her. I stayed composed, silent when she sputtered and pleaded, letting the evidence and actions speak louder than any words could. And in that quiet, charged moment, I realized something essential: the most powerful response wasn't anger or confrontation, it was controlled, methodical action. And as I looked at her unraveling, I knew the balance of our lives had irrevocably changed. After the confrontation, I made a conscious decision to step back and let the consequences unfold. I didn't need to argue, shout, or prove my point anymore. The evidence had spoken for itself, and Hannah's unraveling was inevitable. She tried subtle pleas, leaving messages that hovered between apology and manipulation, but I ignored every single one. Each time her phone buzzed on the counter, I deliberately looked the other way, letting her frustration build in silence. Friends and colleagues began noticing her frantic behavior, the awkward explanations, the small cracks that revealed what I already knew. It was surreal watching someone I had once loved and trusted unravel without me needing to intervene. The apartment felt calm again, though charged with an almost invisible tension. I could feel the shift in energy, my own breathing steadier, my steps lighter. I walked through our space, now mine fully, and appreciated the small details: the hum of the refrigerator, the soft light through the blinds, the quiet that used to feel ordinary now felt empowering. I reveled in the quiet power of knowing I had reclaimed control over our shared life without losing myself to anger or rash decisions. Hannah's attempts to spin the narrative only highlighted her desperation. Her friends began distancing themselves, picking up on the inconsistencies, and her social image quietly eroded. Every message she sent, every attempt to charm or manipulate, fell flat against the calm wall of my indifference. I stayed composed, polite when necessary, but firm in my boundaries, watching the consequences of her actions unfold naturally. It was a strange kind of satisfaction, silent but deeply profound. The betrayal had cut deep, but reclaiming control without stooping to vengeance gave me a sense of strength I hadn't felt in months. And as I closed the blinds that evening, I knew the final chapter of this ordeal was approaching, the one where I could walk away, whole and unshaken, leaving her to face every consequence she had earned. I moved into a new apartment the following week, a small but peaceful space that I could finally call my own. The air felt different, lighter, freer, almost as if every wall, every corner, was exhaling alongside me. For the first time in months, I brewed my coffee slowly, savoring the aroma and the quiet, uninterrupted morning sunlight streaming through the windows. I reflected on the past, on the months of betrayal, on the emotional toll Hannah had exacted, and I felt a quiet pride in myself for staying composed and taking control. Hannah occasionally tried to reach out, leaving messages full of guilt, excuses, and manipulative pleas, but I didn't respond. I realized that protecting my peace and rebuilding my life was more important than engaging with someone who had consistently chosen selfishness over honesty. I began investing time and energy into myself, therapy to untangle the emotional damage, reconnecting with friends who mattered, and planning the future I wanted without compromise. Every small step forward was a reclamation of the life I had thought was lost. Financially, I had secured my assets and recovered what I could, but the real victory was emotional. I no longer felt the anxiety, the panic, or the despair that had shadowed every room of our shared life. I had walked away from the chaos she created, leaving her to face the consequences she deserved. The sense of control, independence, and clarity was more empowering than any confrontation could have been. And as I stood by the window one evening, watching the city lights flicker, I felt a deep sense of closure. The betrayal was behind me, the storm passed, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and free. Sometimes, I realized, the most devastating revenge isn't retaliation, it's walking away, building a life on your terms, and letting the consequences of someone else's choices unfold without interference. I had finally done just that.